My name is Canon Hersey. I'm on my way to Japan. I will follow in the footsteps of my grandfather, John Hersey. About 70 years ago, my grandfather arrived in Hiroshima for the first time. John Hersey told the human story of the first atomic bomb used on people. A book about man's inhumanity to man that transcends time and nationality. That book is Hiroshima by John Hersey. This is a 21st century journey to understand the past. Hiroshima Revealed.
Hiroshima was published in 1946 in the New Yorker magazine by Pulitzer Prize-winning author John Hersey. The New York University School of Journalism awarded it the best piece of journalism of the 20th century. The article depicts the reality of the atomic bombing through the experiences of 6 survivors, or hibakusha. Some of the people interviewed were Reverend Kiyoshi Tanimoto, who helped many people in Hiroshima. The German priest, Father Wilhelm Kleinsorg, who assisted others despite his injuries. And Dr. Terafumi Sasaki, who treated thousands of patients at the Red Cross Hospital. Hiroshima was written so that readers experience the atomic bomb as if they were survivors themselves.
The New York article came out and was sold out within 6 hours because it was an unexpected truth-telling or information. So I guess it sort of caught a fire with the radio, with public attention. I guess people were calling each other.
ABC Radio broadcast a reading of the entire Hiroshima article live in the US only days after its publication. The BBC followed suit.
Noiseless flash. At exactly 15 minutes past 8 in the morning, on August 6, 1945, Japanese time, at the moment
what seemed to be caverns far below, she heard 2 small voices. Help! 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 Toshio! Yako! The voices from below answered. Mrs. Nakamura are bad in the Yako.
And when Father Kleinsorger gave order to some whose faces had been almost blotted out by flash burns, they took their share and then raised themselves a little and bowed to him in faith.
The article revealed to the general public in the US the tragic and devastating consequences of the atomic bombing. Physicist Albert Einstein, also known as the father of the atomic bomb, ordered 1,000 copies of the Hiroshima edition of the New Yorker. He sent them to his fellow scientists with a letter that expressed his deep concern. John Hersey revisited Hiroshima in 1985. He wrote an essay for the Chugoku Shimbun newspaper.
Past, present, and future, linked by a bond of the meaning of the memories. A day will come when no more hibakusha survive. Yet their collective memory remains the greatest hope for the survival of the human race.
As I arrive in Hiroshima, the first person I meet is Koko Kondo. She is a daughter of Reverend Tanimoto and the only surviving member of the people portrayed in the book Hiroshima.
I would like to explain to you. My mother and myself are one block away from the pond. That was
right here.
Yeah,
right here.
that's where we were. And my father was on the top of that mountain, Hoi Mountain.
Yeah.
And as you can see, some of the bridges were
Koko
broken.
never revealed that she was a hibakusha,
Detour.
or survivor of the atomic
He
bombing,
was on the top of
and
that
never told her story till she was in her mid-30s.
came up to his mind.
She changed her mind when she learned why her father had so much compassion for the survivors.
What's happened to neighbors? So he started coming down that hill, tried to go to the church, but the bridge is broken, so he had to make many detours. And many people asked for help. Help. That's all only he heard. But being a minister, wanted to help the others. But that day, he said, he only concerned about daughter, wife, church member, and neighbors. So his resentment of the guilt put him to the place work. When I heard that, finally, I really understood why he was so involved to help the people in Hiroshima, especially survivors, because just like that.
Yeah, it's a sense of commitment.
Koko was born in 1944, the first daughter of Kiyoshi and Chisa Tanimoto. Growing up, she suffered from the after effects of radiation sickness. She survived and moved to Tokyo for high school and then attended college in the US. Koko went far away from Hiroshima to hide her identity as a survivor of the bombing.
That day I decided.
But harsh reality caught up with her, and she faced discrimination in America as a survivor.
That's why I went to high school in Tokyo. I went to a college education in the United States. Then my senior year, I engaged. I talked to my parents, and I didn't engage. Engagement was cut off because one of his uncle was a medical doctor. Koko is no good. She could not bear the normal child. The whole family against it. So I had to come back to Japan.
That we came across the original document from your father. I guess my grandfather had come to find your father through Father Kleinsorge, and hadn't been able to find him and left him a note.
Yes.
And then I think your father stayed up all night. And
Wrote
this 9-page
That's a
document.
copy?
And, yeah, this is for
Oh, thank you. I wanted to have this one for a long time. I'm so thrilled. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is his writing.
Reverend Tanimoto's detailed account of his experience before and after the atomic bombing was handwritten in English.
I began again to row its boat across the river to carry injured people. In the darkness, I heard the woman's cry, saying, "Help! Here are people just about to be drowned. Help! Help!"
Tanimoto's account must have had a great impact on my grandfather and helped inspire the creation of the book, Hiroshima. My journey began at Yale University in Connecticut, where my grandfather was a student and later a teacher. Many of my grandfather's letters and memoirs are kept safely at the Beinecke Library at Yale. I first read Hiroshima when I was 12 or 13 years old. I still remember the human brutality and resilience within my grandfather's words.
Where would you like it? I guess just right over here is great, thank you.
Boxes and boxes of memories and historic documents. I looked into the history and researched the surroundings of Hiroshima and the life of my grandfather. He never did interviews with the press about Hiroshima. I've been thinking about the meaning of Hiroshima and our shared responsibility to create a better future. My grandfather died in 1993 at the age of 78. I will never forget his last words to me. There are so many more stories to tell.
This looks like my baby. So it's probably, could be my grandfather. This looks like perhaps with the Chinese help.
My grandfather was born in 1914 in Tianjin, China, the son of an American educator and a missionary. His first language was Mandarin Chinese. He lived in China until the age of 11, when his family moved to the U.S.
He always kind of expressed that he didn't necessarily feel as an American, but felt as an internationalist or someone from the world.
John graduated from Yale and was hired as a writer for Time magazine by Henry Luce, the founder of Time Life and one of the giants of American publishing. As a war correspondent during World War II, John wrote a book about five-star General MacArthur. His book about the European front of World War II, A Bell for Adano, won the Pulitzer Prize. As I searched for my grandfather's recollections within the cardboard boxes at Yale, something caught my attention. It was a one-way train ticket from New York to Charlotte, North Carolina. The date was August 23, 1946, just before the release of Hiroshima. Charlotte was where my grandmother Frances Ann, John's first wife, had grown up. He may have decided to find shelter at the home of his first wife's parents in order to protect his family.
This is a letter I found at the same time, which had these words written to his mother.
I'd suggest referring them to the New Yorker, which will forward all messages.
Perhaps my grandfather had anticipated the pressure that would arise from the publication of Hiroshima. There was another letter that was addressed to his mother that was written several days after the release of the New Yorker.
Very secret. Only 3 or 4 people around the New Yorker itself knew up until the last few days.
After US forces dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the army and the government strictly controlled information regarding the effects of the A-bombs on people. Given the political climate, preparations for the publication of Hiroshima in the New Yorker were conducted in absolute secrecy by the chief editor, William Shawn, the president, Harold Ross, and John Hersey. This was the only time the New Yorker has ever devoted an entire issue to a single article. Understanding what was at stake, the editors wrote,
The New Yorker this week devotes its entire editorial space to an article on the almost complete obliteration of a city by one atomic bomb and what happened to the people of that city. It does so in the conviction that few of us have yet comprehended the all but incredible destructive power of this weapon, and that everyone might well take time to consider the terrible implications of its use.
He was like 31, 32, and really standing up against such a difficult political spectrum and trying to tell an untellable story. He was a very charismatic, energetic young man. With much praise and rave reviews, Hiroshima gained international acclaim. John Hersey changed the world, but the world was about to change John. I have been building one future and the Shadow People Project as an artist and as an organizer. Shadow people are people in the shadows of hope and opportunity. The idea came from my grandfather's depiction of the people whose bodies were vaporized by the heat of the atomic bomb, leaving only their shadows. Every day, there are many who lose their lives and voices behind the shadows of war, greed, and discrimination. I seek to empower the voices of those hidden in the shadows through art and education. My grandfather taught me to act as a global citizen. I believe all people have the power to create the future they want to live within. I visited my father, John Hersey Jr., who lives in upstate New York, to ask him about my grandfather. Until this recent conversation, My father and I had never spoken about Hiroshima. My father used to take me to visit my grandfather. My father is an artist who has addressed freedom of speech, environmental justice, and racial equality through his life and art. So yes, we're here to talk about your father and the time around Hiroshima specifically, as well as kind of the echoes of that, and the impact that that had on his life.
I think it was, initially it was an assignment, but he got so emotionally bound up in it. Before we were talking about his being in China in 1939. The Japanese were invading China and bombing cities and for killing his people. It was his homeland, really. China, being where he was born, was his homeland, and the Japanese were brutally attacking the Chinese people. So to go to Japan was a little bit of a leap, definitely emotionally, because now we had to empathize with Japanese people, and not only empathize but sympathize.
I was influenced by his humanity and internationalism.
I don't think he was secretive about his writing, but he didn't talk about it. I'm sure he didn't talk about it with other writers. My job is to write, and so he did that and didn't talk about it much.
My grandfather never spoke about Hiroshima, not to me or to his son.
John Hersey was working for Life and the New Yorker magazine. John went to Japan in May 1946 with plans to write a piece on Hiroshima. Although he had obtained a travel permit under his status as a Life magazine correspondent, John had begun to distance himself from Life, largely because of its nationalistic stance. He developed and published Hiroshima for the New Yorker, a competitor of Time Life. His decision created an estrangement from Time Life founder Henry Luce.
It was sort of a highlight, but then he got sort of thrown into the shadow of it also, because it was Time, his boss, Henry Luce, was upset at him and wouldn't talk to him and took him off the wall of fame and all this immediately, and because he lost the greatest story of John Hersey's. I arrived at American University in Washington, D.C. to ask history professor Peter Kuznick exactly what impact Hiroshima has had on American society.
Yeah. And those are some of the posters that folks in Hiroshima and Nagasaki sent me.
Peter Kuznick has taught at American University since 1986 and serves as the director of the Nuclear Studies Institute.
10% were opposed and 5% had no opinion, so 85%. The Roper poll that was issued a couple months later showed that 23% of the American people said they wished the Japanese had not surrendered so quickly so we could have dropped more atomic bombs on them. When that came out, it stunned the American public. It caught them off guard. They were not used to dealing with Japanese victims of American bombing or other American actions as human beings. And the 6 people who John Hersey profiled were clearly human beings. And so the response from the public and the response even from scientists who worked on the Manhattan Project was, God, what have we done?
The administration of President Harry Truman grew anxious about the impact Hiroshima had on US public opinion. In early 1947, Henry Stimson, who was US Secretary of War at the time of the bombing, wrote an article entitled "The Decision to Use the Atomic Bomb" for Harper's Magazine. The piece argued that the atomic bomb ended the war, and had the US launched a major landing operation on Japan, the number of deaths and casualties might have reached 1 million people. US leadership tried to control the narrative by justifying the use of the atomic bomb.
3 days later, on August 9, 1945, on a hot summer morning, calm, bright, and windless, at 2 minutes after 11 o'clock, another atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki, Japan.
People inside the White House and the science advisors during the war were very upset about the response to the publication of Hiroshima. And they put pressure first on Carl Compton and then on Henry Stimson to publish a response to answer, not directly to answer John Hersey's work, but to answer the questions that were raised in the public mind. So by 1946, writing something that could be interpreted as being anti-American was the kind of thing that people would fear, people could lose their jobs for, people would be attacked for. So in that context, the response does make a lot more sense, that they would anticipate this kind of very ugly, negative backlash. The government would do everything it could to repress those kinds of images and that kind of discussion. But that's why this book is so important, because it breaks through that unofficial censorship that was going on.
John Hersey continued to write while teaching at Yale during the 1960s. Hiroshima inspired many people and had become a catalyst for the anti-nuclear movements and atomic bomb survivor support programs. However, nuclear weapon programs accelerated. John remained silent.
Hiroshima was published against the U.S. government's interest. I wanted to know how John got the story during U.S. Army-occupied Japan. A German missionary priest, Father Kleinsorg, helped to introduce my grandfather to other survivors and assisted with interpretation. Father Kleinsorg saw the atomic bomb from Nobaricho Church, which was about 1 kilometer away from the hypocenter. He assisted other survivors. How did my grandfather meet Father Kleinsorg in Hiroshima? I decided to search for the link between John and Kleinsorg. I found a file full of letters between my grandfather and my grandmother, Frances Ann. here, March 29th, she writes, "No letters again for ages." So
I hope you got where you wanted to go, and hope you will tell me all about it. You have been so mum on the political situation that I feel as if I had lost my guiding star.
The communication between them showed that my grandfather sometimes did not reveal where he was. At times, he was out of contact entirely. I think they're very aware that the letters are being read and that they have to be smart about what they talk about. While looking through my grandmother Frances Ann's letters to John, I came across something curious. My grandmother writes, "Mother and Daddy got home in time for supper last night and were full of themselves.
They saw a lot of General Eichelberger and his wife, and the general gave Pappy a real old samurai sword that he had brought from Japan. He says that General Eichelberger is a great admirer of yours and would like to see you if you get to Japan. He is going back there this week, I believe, so do look him up if you get there."
But it's clear that she knows that he's going there, and she found him an ally in the government, in the military, that knew of his writing and of his work and would open a door for him. Robert Eichelberger was the commanding general of the U.S. Army in occupied Japan after the war ended. It was Frances Ann who introduced John to Eichelberger. Yeah, this is from the original notes. You have Eichelberger that Frances Ann, that my grandmother recommended that he look up. You have German priest, which probably represents Kleinsorge.
Frances Ann Cannon was born in 1919 in North Carolina, a member of a prominent family in the textile business. She attended Sarah Lawrence College in New York. During that time, she had a relationship with John F. Kennedy, years before he became president. JFK proposed marriage to Frances Ann, but she turned him down. In 1940, she met John, a prominent young journalist, and they were married. Frances Ann introduced John to JFK. John wrote a piece about JFK that made him a hero in the public eye, and John's work supported the growth of JFK's political career. Coming from a prestigious family, Frances Ann had strong ties in business and political circles which helped to support John in many ways.
Eichelberger is almost, certainly the connection of Frances Ann as recommended by Frances Ann's father, John Hersey's wife, which would undoubtedly lead to opening doors to documents like this, which is through, government documents in regards to U.S. Strategic Bombing Survey. So this was U.S. government's definition of what happened. This document, created by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey, was an eyewitness account written by the German Jesuit priest, Father Ziems, who was at a monastery in Hiroshima when the bomb was dropped.
All important people were practically killed. The major, the commander of the city.
Father Ziems was a colleague of Father Kleinsorge. General Eichelberger likely gave this document to John. Father Zeems probably introduced Father Kleinsorg to John. Father Kleinsorg would lead John to the other survivors. Francis Ann initiated an introduction that would open the door to Hiroshima for John. Another person who played a major role in Hiroshima was Reverend Kiyoshi Tanimoto, who was introduced to John by Father Kleinsorg. I discovered an important document in an envelope. It was a memoir written by Reverend Tanimoto to John in English. A vivid personal account of Tanimoto's experience when the atomic bomb was dropped.
Approaching there, I found men and women from 15 to 20 in number in the water, because the river got the full tide in the evening. Their bodies were clammy with matter. The burned skin was first yellow and then red swelled, and in the evening suppurated and discharged. What a heartbreaking scene this was.
Reverend Tanimoto was a Methodist minister who witnessed the atomic bombing. He was 3 kilometers away from the epicenter and fortunate not to endure any severe injuries. He ran to Nagarekawa Church where he served as a minister. The church lay in ruins. The book, Hiroshima, depicts the heroic efforts by Reverend Tanimoto and Father Kleinsorg to help many people and save lives.
He reached down and took a woman by the hands, but her skin slipped off in huge, glove-like pieces. He was so sickened by this that he had to sit down for a moment. Then he got out into the water and, through a small man, lifted several of the men and women who were naked into his boat.
Probably a big inspiration for the final book being in the first person. It's very descriptive of the trauma that he went through and the pain and the sort of the sorrow of it. It's very, very evident. I think it was Father Kleinsorg who recommended that he find Tanimoto. Because my grandfather was from a missionary family, it made a lot of sense to him to sort of find the story through that religious angle. Hiroshima was developed with the help of Reverend Tanimoto, who was college educated in the U.S. I went to Hiroshima to find the meaning of memory within my grandfather's book, Hiroshima. I am meeting Reverend Tanimoto's daughter, Koko Kondo at Shukein Park, located in central Hiroshima. This is the place where Reverend Tanimoto saved many lives in the book Hiroshima.
Hello. How are you, Koko? So nice to see you.
Yeah.
Koko was 8 months old when the atomic bomb hit 1 kilometer away from their home. Her mother sought refuge in this park with Koko.
Mr. Tanimoto lifted them away from the boat, and as he did so, he experienced such horror at disturbing the dead, preventing them, he momentarily felt, from launching their craft and going on their ghostly way, that he said out loud, "Please forgive me for taking this boat. I must use it for others who are alive."
The park was surrounded by blazing fires. Reverend Tanimoto tried by all means possible to save people's lives.
But my father's case, he tried to help many people here and tried to take people to the other side.
Yeah.
And he said he was able to find a little boat, but it was a dead body was.
I vividly remember that.
So as you know, he had to take all the body out, and he had to take the people to cross this river.
Yeah, it was a great moment of bravery.
Many people are, wounded, and it's too hot. They wanted to go into the, water, because inland sea water comes up the river. That means sea water. It's a very salty water, so it's cutting or burning. Many people say it was so difficult to describe the pain.
Yeah, since arriving by train, all I could think of when I saw the rivers was the stories of the pain and the suffering that people went through. We always have the one thing that always sticks with me also is eternal opportunity. Following in her father's footsteps, Koko actively advocates the importance of peace and the abolishment of nuclear weapons. I think that that's a very meaningful story of Hiroshima to me, is that memory.
You can go and do that.
Hello. Yes. I'm so grateful because this city, I want you to see this city from your own eye, and probably you already met many of the survivors. Is that right? And you heard many people's words. That's gonna be in your heart forever. And I'm so grateful that you came to this city. Thank you. When I growing up, my puberty age, I was 13, 14, 15. I had to go to the ABCC, Atomic Bomb Casualty Commission, since I was little. It's not a hospital, it's a research center, because the whole world didn't know how the radiation affected the human body. So they wanted to have a checkup. I went to the room for checkup. Then The doctor said, Miss Tanimoto, please go to such and such a room. I said, hi. I didn't ask what kind of test they're gonna give me. I went there. It was an auditorium. There was many people inside. Maybe it wasn't a big room, but no window. They only have a lights. And the spotlights were shining to the stage. I had to stand on the middle of the stage. Doctor said, please go up the stage. So I did. Then doctor said, Miss Tanimoto, take off your gown. I had to take off my gown. Doctor told me to turn right and left. I look up the ceiling. I said, please help me to take me away. Maybe it wasn't that a long time, but to me it was a long time. Then I said, all right, as long as I live, I am not going to tell anyone that I was in Hiroshima. From that moment, I decided not to tell anyone that I am surviving. You're the one make next world. I'm putting all my hope to each one of you. We don't need any nuclear weapon.
When my grandfather revisited Hiroshima in 1985, he wrote, "Past, present, and future linked by a bond of the meaning of the memories. A day will come when no more hibakusha survive. Yet their collective memory remains the greatest hope for the survival of the human race. I continue my own journey into Hiroshima to get to know my grandfather, to understand his silence, to listen to the survivors, and to discover the meaning of the memories."